us to get going. He has other things to do.
Did you say good morning and see we were starting? Okay, all right. Good morning, everyone. So nice to have you. Just give us a few minutes with the technology. Thank you so much. I guess we can go ahead with the greetings
The
and
greetings.
stuff,
Okay,
and
we'll start the
hopefully,
greetings. At least hopefully we get on.
happy celebration. Keep it further up so that they understand. They speak with somebody at a high level in the so that they understand the urgency.
Honorable Purnell Charles Jr., Minister of Labor and Social Security, Dr. Martin Batiste, Division Chief, Social Sector Division, Caribbean Development Bank, Dr. Christine Hendricks, Executive Director, the Jamaica Council for Persons with Disabilities, ladies and gentlemen online and in person, good day and welcome. Hello, good day. Am I alone? Yes, welcome. Welcome to the workshop designed to disseminate the findings from the Jamaica Disability Assessment. I am Professor Aldry Henry Lee, and I will guide the proceedings this morning. We thank our host, the Jamaica Council for Persons with Disabilities. We express our profound gratitude to the Caribbean Development Bank for funding this important study. Let us give CDB a resounding round of applause. I think we can do a little better than that, you know. Thank you, Dr. Batiste, and please tell your colleagues at the bank that we are very grateful for the funding of this very important disability study. So according to the program, I have to give some brief remarks as project lead, so I will do that, and then I will invite Dr. Batiste to come and give his remarks. So, ladies and gentlemen, the research that we are going to hear about today involved the conduct of socioeconomic disability assessments in 4 of CDB's borrowing member countries: Grenada, St. Lucia, Jamaica, and the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. The main output of these studies is the identification of priority areas for program and project intervention in support of the sustainable development of persons with disabilities. Persons with disabilities were integral to the study, and we are proud to say that at every step of the way, we sought their guidance and direction. We are indebted to Senator Morris, who was also one of the investigators and whose interventions, and you heard him, some of you would have been with us yesterday and would have heard his interventions as he presented. We thank all the members of the research team who have worked hard. Thank you to Professor Maureen Sams-Vaughan, who is the principal investigator for the Jamaican study. You'll hear from her later. We are trying to get the devices working so that we can see the presentation. As you will hear from the study, Jamaica has made several commitments to persons with disabilities. We have ratified the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. The Disability Act came into effect on February 14, 2022. Following its approval in 2014, and the affirmation of disabilities regulations in 2021. Yet there is much to be done. Persons with disabilities are at risk of being left behind in the fulfillment of the Sustainable Development Goals. As we strive to fulfill a vision of Jamaica, the place of choice to live, work, raise families, and do business, we must ensure that we achieve inclusive development and everyone is able to participate fully and effectively in the development of our society. As I reviewed the 4 CDB country disability assessments, I found that there were several common themes throughout the Caribbean region where persons with disabilities are concerned. So there have been several calls for action, and I will just speak about a few. One, inclusive education. So we need appropriate accommodations, assistive technologies, and support services to ensure that all persons with disabilities can realize their full potential. 2, disability responsive health care that provides preventive, curative, and rehabilitative services without discrimination. 3, accessible infrastructure that ensures that public spaces, transportation, and information networks are inclusive for persons with diverse abilities. Inclusivity of disabilities should be mainstreamed in urban planning. 4, inclusive labor market with anti-discrimination policies to create a workplace that reflects diversity. 5, independent living and community inclusion that provides community engagement programs, recreational activities, and accessible public spaces. 6, acceptance and respect. Perhaps what is most important to persons with disabilities is for others to focus on their abilities and strengths and not their disabilities. They do not want pity. They want acceptance and dignified social programs and protection. They want us to dismantle the barriers that hinder their progress and build a society where inclusion is the rule rather than the exception. I will stop here because there are other themes, but I thought I would just highlight that throughout the Caribbean there are common themes, so Jamaica is not unique in what you are hearing. You're going to hear later on that there are some of what I've said. Jamaica study has also revealed those findings. And there is also going to be an upcoming regional workshop where we'll present other common findings. Ladies and gentlemen, as a representative of the University of the West Indies, I want to just tell you what we are doing here. We are doing at the University of the West Indies. So this project is very important to us because it reflects the progress that we want to see in the Caribbean. Our mission for the University of the West Indies is to assist in the positive transformation of the Caribbean and the wider world. the university has approved a UWI disability policy, and we have established a Center for Disability Studies. The UWI disability policy states that we are committed to promoting access to education and employment for persons with disabilities while maintaining our academic and professional standards. We encourage all the applicants, and if you know any currently registered students, to disclose their disabilities so that we can cater for them. So I had to say something as a member of the UWI team to show that we too have taken the issue of persons with disabilities very seriously. So thank you so much for joining us this morning. Please engage with the process. We are especially pleased that persons with disabilities are in attendance. Please give them a round of applause. I know it's difficult to get to us so early in the morning, so we really appreciate your attendance and your attention. We want to hear from you. We want you to tell us what are the short-term, medium-term, and long-term recommendations. Mr. CDB is right there, and he's waiting and ready to implement the policies that you come up with today. So please be very open. We want to hear from you, and please engage with the process. So these are my opening remarks. As project lead of the regional study and also representing the University of the West Indies. So now I want you to join me in welcoming Dr. Martin Batiste, Division Chief, Social Sector Division, Caribbean Development Bank. Please make him feel welcome.
Thank you, Professor Henry Lee. Honorable Pernell Charles Jr., Minister of Labor and Social Security. Dr. Christine Hendricks, Executive Director, the Jamaica Council for Persons with Disabilities. Professor Maureen Sams-Vaughan, Country Project Lead. Distinguished members of the disabilities community, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. I wish to bring you greetings from the President and staff of the Caribbean Development Bank, and to thank you for inviting us to be part of this engaging encounter, this disability assessment, validation, and consultation workshop which you are having here today. Friends, the CDB has demonstrated our ongoing commitment and investment opportunities to the Caribbean region's growing communities of persons with disabilities. And that is why we had identified the need and mobilized the resources to enhance the policy and technical capacity of 4 of our member countries, which you just heard about: St. Lucia, Trinidad and Tobago, Grenada, and of course, Jamaica. The conduct of the Disabilities Assessment and Policy Dialogue was designed to help countries design, implement, monitor, and evaluate evidence-based programs that mainstream disability through the availability of qualitative and quantitative data on disabilities. As our president, Dr. Jean Leon, emphasizes, we have to measure better to target better. So through these assessments, strategic priority areas have emerged which will provide countries with a suite of urgent areas of action, some of which you just heard, to improve the lives and livelihoods of persons with disabilities. Whether those are related to changes in regulations and standards, expanding access to services such as high quality health, education, and social services, increasing employment opportunities for persons with disabilities, and promoting entrepreneurship, including persons with disabilities in policymaking and decision-making organs of governance, The time has long gone to show meaningful engagement and empowerment of persons with disabilities. Indeed, this will assist our countries to continue the journey started long ago, beyond having signed conventions, beginning with the International Conventions on the Elimination of All Forms of Racial Discrimination in 1966, to accelerate concretizing those conventions, whether in legislation, in learning, in labor, in leisure, and in life. Part of our work as the CDB is to serve as a catalytic development partner for disabilities mainstreaming. And so for us at the bank, we have and continue to approve projects and programs that address disability and development imperatives in a range of areas such as education, agriculture, infrastructure, rehabilitation, and others. Now, two of these initiatives come to mind. In fact, we are just finalizing a model special needs inclusive education policy and strategy. That strategy and policy will provide a blueprint to countries to democratize access, treatment, and learning experiences in the classrooms for every person, regardless of their own unique and exceptional circumstances, so that each can be treated equally and experience success in learning. Because for us, access to quality learning must not be restricted to the confines of basic education. But persons with disabilities must have access to the full course of learning, to tertiary education and beyond, so that they are able to contribute meaningfully to the development of their communities and our countries. Secondly, throughout our programming, we are mainstreaming disability inclusion in all of our projects and programs, including our infrastructure projects, so that our built environment continues to be configured for inclusive access to persons with disabilities. For us, we understand that this is not a favor, this is a right. The right to access, the right to dignity, the right to services, the right to contribute to development, the right to live fulfilled lives. And for us, and for the governments, it's about moving from optics to opportunities for everyone. Friends, the CDB, we look forward to the results of this meaningful stakeholder consultation, which we have with you, public institutions, private sector, and civil society at large. The continued mainstreaming of disability in the bank's work throughout the region is indeed an imperative for us to strengthen the fulsome participation of persons with disabilities in society and economy, consistent with the SDGs. This project will provide our governments, and in this case, the government of Jamaica, and CDB, with an opportunity to develop more targeted evidence-based projects and programs to support disability mainstreaming. So we look forward for moving beyond the studies to how we can program and make sure that the services that are to be granted do become a reality. We wish to thank the UE team of consultants, the Jamaica Council for Persons with Disabilities, and the government of Jamaica through the Ministry of Social, Labor and Social Security and the Planning Institute of Jamaica for its continued commitment to this invaluable work. We all agree that we dare not leave the welfare and well-being of persons with disabilities to the tender mercies of those with favor. But it must be and is, I know for your government, the intentional investment in the sensibilities, systems, and services that place you at the center of their work and our work together. For us at CDB, we will continue to work closely with all of our partners, and we stand ready to support our countries as they work towards ensuring that the full potential needs of persons with disabilities is harnessed in the spirit of your motto, nothing about us without us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Baptiste, for your call for evidence-based policies that will help us to measure better in order that we can target better. Thank you for your commitment to persons with disabilities so that we can move from optics to opportunities. Let's give Dr. Baptiste another round of applause. Thank you so much. We will now welcome Dr. Christine Hendricks, Executive Director, the Jamaica Council for Persons with Disabilities, and we want to thank her as she makes her way for including this study in this week as we try to raise the level of awareness of disability issues. Thank you so much, Dr. Hendricks.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. The Honorable Pernell Charles Jr., Minister of Labor and Social Security, and his team, Professor Sams Vaughan, who wears so many hats, but in this instance, country project lead, Dr. Martin Baptiste, Divisional Chief, Social Sector Division, Caribbean Development Bank, and of course, Professor Henry Lee, not only chair this morning, but project lead and pro-vice chancellor of the University of the West Indies. Our partners here this morning from the Social Development Commission, the JCF, the GIS, Cornwall Combined Disabilities Association, the Early Stimulation Program here in the West, the staff of the JCPD, or Lone Star, who does tremendously across 4 parishes, RADA in Hanover, and our persons with disabilities from the Western region. Good morning. It is such a privilege and a pleasure of mine to be here this morning as we continue to share and continue to make the public and you as persons with disabilities more aware of what is happening with disabilities, what needs to happen, and this particular project and study that has been done really highlight many of the things that you as persons with disabilities have been saying over the years, and so solidifies we have in black and white exactly the situation that you face, and it therefore challenges us who are the implementers to ensure that we put the systems in place, we serve you better to ensure that you are empowered, ensure that you take your rightful place in this Jamaica that is your home, as well as much as it is the home of any one of us and other persons in Jamaica. We want you to know that you are not being left behind, despite what the study shows, that if it is that we do not change the trajectory in a very deliberate way, you will be left behind. But we are promising you that we will not leave you behind, because you are important to us. Without you and without your participation and involvement in this country, we will not get to the development status that we are seeking to reach. And so I want you to know this morning that this study is about you, and we want to hear your voice, as Professor Henry Lee said earlier, because we want to know what is important to you, what should be first, what should we be doing first, what should we be looking at next, and for the long term, what is important to ensure that we get you to the place that you need to get. So for those who do not know, the Jamaica Council for Persons with Disabilities, formerly known as the Jamaica Council for the Handicapped, way back in the 70s, was established to address the needs of the persons with disabilities in Jamaica. Over the years, our functions have expanded, leading to it being established through the Disabilities Act of 2014, solidifying its role as a statutory body. The Council is mandated to promote, protect, and ensure the full and equal enjoyment of privileges, interests, benefits, and treatments for persons with disabilities on an equal basis with others in society. This week, Disabilities Awareness Week, is a pivotal annual event designed to raise awareness about the Disabilities Act and promote accessibility under the theme, Inclusion in Action, Building Accessible Communities. And so throughout the week, so far, we have launched the accessibility checklist, and perhaps you would have heard the minister indicating in Parliament, meaning that it is important to him too. And this national sensitization and validation session held in Kingston yesterday, here we are in the Western region today, ensuring that you too hear what you said in this study, and if you didn't participate, others on your behalf, so that we can make right what has not been so right in the past and even in the present. So the Caribbean Development Bank commissioned this study on disability in Jamaica, and the university team undertook the research supported by key stakeholders. And of course, the data, and I know Minister loves this aspect, the fact that there is data that states exactly what is happening. So it revealed that there is a large disparity for persons with disabilities, despite the positive economic indicators that our country has been saying. The findings highlight the challenges and the ongoing initiatives to ensure inclusion and to ensure that we align to the UN Sustainable Development Goals and Vision 2030. We're thankful for the recommendations that have come out of this study that will help us to continue to engage our public and private sector partners to ensure that your lives are better than it has been. So the JCPD stands at a good place to ensure that this study is not just left on paper. And so we are well positioned to utilize the findings to ensure that we advocate for your rights and your well-being, and we leverage the valuable insight that we have from this study to develop and create partnerships to ensure that your lives, not only through the council, but through every government agency, through every private sector partner, your lives become better. And so as we discuss this week and in the ensuing week, we discuss with the various stakeholders, our ultimate aim is to get action on the ground so that you can feel it and that your lives will be the better for it. Thank you so very much. We look forward to hearing from you some more today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Hendricks, for reaffirming the commitment of the Jamaica Council for Persons with Disabilities, and Minister and Dr. Batiste. I can tell you she was 100% supporter of the study. So let's give her a round of applause. She gave her full commitment, her full support, and she was very insistent that we have it as part of the celebration of Disability Week, Awareness Week. So thank you so much. We really appreciate it. And we will continue to work with you as you implement the interventions. And of course, we are there to help you to monitor and evaluate. So ladies and gentlemen, we have a very important gentleman with us, and we thank him even before he makes his way to talk to us, because he has a very, 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 very busy schedule, but he thought it was important that he came to be part of this engagement and to tell you how much that he appreciates the study. So let us welcome our minister, the Honorable Pernell Charles Jr., Minister of Labor and Social Security. Please make him feel welcome.
Good morning, everyone. Let me, of course, acknowledge our chair for this morning, Professor Henry Lee, who is also the project lead for this very important project. Acknowledge Dr. Baptiste, Dr. Hendricks, Professor Maureen Sams-Vaughan, who is our country project lead, and all of the distinguished colleagues who are here. I know that the team is comprising research experts and other persons who perhaps have done a lot of work, but you don't hear your name called. But we consider you critical. When I look across the room, I asked, who is here? And I'm realizing that we have persons from SDC, Early Stimulation Program, JCF, RADA, Combined Disabilities Association for Cornwall. We have persons here from the Kiwanis Club as well, and a good representation of this important group of Jamaicans who are celebrating this week, Disabilities Awareness Week. And it is very important for me to be here. And not just to say, well, the minister turn up, but let me tell you why. And Dr. Hendricks, who has had now several conversations with me, must recognize that when I was in school, I used to ask a lot of questions. And sometimes the essence behind it is to interrogate with intention. And our intention here is clear. When you listen to Dr. Baptiste from CDB, what you hear is an understanding of the impact of that investment. And I hope that we will be able, with partnership with the CDB as we follow through, to ensure that we are not just collecting data. And I know Professor Henry Lee, so I don't have to ask a question. And I know our country project lead. These are two excellent, well-known experts. And what we will be doing and what we should be doing is finding every way to identify the right data and to apply to it the respective analysis that will guide us now as leaders in making decisions that make sense for persons with disabilities and for Jamaica. When you look on the statistics, which again, Dr. Hendricks will testify. I ask these questions. What's the numbers? Because if you don't know, then you're simply shooting in the wind. If you're not aware and you don't have in your mind some specificity as to how you're going to use the allocations, then it means that your outcome is one that cannot be strategic. And unless you are a country or an individual with endless resources, meaning your money can't done, your pocket long it deep, right? Then you don't have nothing to worry about, but we're not there. So that means we have to worry about it, and we have to make sure that we utilize our resources in the most efficient way. And we have to make sure that we identify and define the policies that are going to make the best sense for you. And that is why this is important for us to have this discussion in this week, Disabilities Awareness Week. And yesterday, I hope many of you took the time to listen to me in Parliament, championing the cause of this important community, our important community. Because we want everyone in Jamaica to appreciate that the Disabilities Awareness Week is not really for us. We do this every day The JCPD is working consistently, continuously, constantly. But we want the rest of Jamaica to have a week where they can understand the excellence in the community, where we can celebrate the excellence in the community, where we can reiterate and reaffirm to the country the need for us to highlight the importance of the protocols and the policies and the programs and the plans to integrate persons who have disabilities into the workplace, into the communities as best as possible. So the week is for Jamaica, for them to be informed and to get more involved. And this session today is a very important complement to that effort for us to have a resounding conversation around persons with disabilities. This is, in my perspective, one of the more important assessments that are being done, which I believe will allow for us to truly dismantle a lot of the barriers confronting individuals with disabilities across the Caribbean region, not just Jamaica. And I know that when we start to drill down into the details, the data is going to expose patterns that some, like Dr. Hendricks, may consider an affirmation of what she has been saying. And for others, it will be shocking. But what it will do is allow for us to have a more accurate understanding of what is, so we can know what needs to be done for us to achieve the goals that we are all seeking. So we hope that the workshop will truly be a testament to the work that is being done by the CDB and by the project leads and the team. In the course of the session, again, I hope that another thing that comes out is urgency. There needs to be an energy and an urgency in getting these things done. We don't, listen, the last 3 years have been a testament to us all. Anybody who thinks that tomorrow is a surety, listen to me. I recall, Dr. Henry Lee, I had my first by-election, March 2nd, 2020. Won the by-election, and I went home and I said, yes, wow. Ready now. 10 days later, COVID. So I became a member of parliament, ushered into the period of COVID. Within 10 days, one of the largest seats. I remember going home and saying to myself, why, Lord, why now? Why would you choose to have me become a member of parliament in one of the largest seats in the country right as the massive pandemic is going to hit? But, truly, we don't get more than we can bear. And so it is similar. But there needs to be an urgency with how we are moving, because you don't know what tomorrow is going to bring. Whether it is a pandemic, whether it is an earthquake, whether it is a hurricane, whether it is a tragedy, whether it is triumph, whatever it is, you don't know. So I want us to move with alacrity. I want this group to have an urgency in addressing the issues and in making sure that we are achieving our goals. So let us collectively define our future by taking the assessment which is being done or has been done, and using the information to define the future for every single Jamaican, including all who are differently abled. I believe that we must embark on this day's work with two things: a determination and a hope that our goal of an inclusive Jamaica will not just fall as action words, but actually be words in action. We want this to be a reality. We have some significant room for improvement. So I stand as a minister who wants to improve, who will work to improve, and will work with you to make sure that we achieve these goals. Thank you so much, and I wish that we have a productive session today. One love.
Thank you so much, Minister, for underscoring the importance of research in the formulation of evidence-based policies and calling for an urgent action for us to implement policies and programs that will improve the quality of life of persons with disabilities. I'm sure your remarks were like music to Dr. Batiste's ears, because he sees and he hears the commitment that you have to persons with disabilities, and he stands ready, that you, Minister, stand ready to implement with his support those programs and policies that will improve the quality of life of our persons with disabilities. Let's give the Minister another round of applause. Thank you so much. Well, ladies and gentlemen, the moment that we have been waiting for. The remarks were important, but we have now reached the most important part of the workshop, where Professor Maureen Sams-Vaughan will present the findings from the Jamaica Disability Assessment. Please make her feel welcome.
Thank you, Professor Henry Lee. Minister, really glad to have you here with us today. Drs. Baptiste and Hendricks and Professor Henry Lee, and most importantly, all of you who are here today. It is absolutely wonderful to see everyone here today, and it is really my privilege to be able to share with you some of the work that we have been doing. And one of the important parts after this is the discussion that's going to take place with all of you here today. So the University of the West Indies was commissioned to do a disability assessment for Jamaica. Next slide. Oh, you see that it says November 2023. You know, Minister was talking about how things happen, right? Because the workshop should have been in November 2023, but then we had an earthquake. And we also started this project before COVID. And we had to work around COVID in the way that we did this project. So as Minister was talking about how things changed suddenly, and how you have to adapt. So we have to adapt, and many of you here know well about how you have to adapt to situations. So I am going to be speaking to you now. I want you to understand, though, that what I'm presenting here today is just the highlights. That there's a nice bigger report, and the intention is, I'm sure, to make it into a readable version, because, you know, we're going to have a big kind of academic report, and the intention certainly will be to make it into a user-friendly version that we can circulate. So I intend to be user-friendly today. I intend to share with you exactly what we found in a way that everybody will be able to appreciate. But I do have to give the background to how we did this. I do have to tell you how and why we did the things we did, and then to give you the results of the findings, and then to look at the broad strategic things that came out of the study. Next slide. So the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities was adopted on the 13th of December 2006 by the United Nations. It opened for signature in March 2007, and the date opened for its signature in the United Nations, 82 countries signed that day. This was the highest number of signatories in history on an opening day. So this was the first time that so many countries signed any document by the UN. It was recognized as the first comprehensive human rights treaty of the 21st century. So lots of firsts here for the CRPD. The convention entered into force on the 3rd of May 2008, and most Caribbean governments signed and then later on ratified the CRPD. So you sign it first. It's a process that you use in the UN. You sign it first, and then you go back and you have discussions with your government, and then you ratify it later. Next slide. But I'm proud to report that Jamaica was the first country in the world to not only sign, but ratify the document on the same day. All right? And so we stand tall and proud internationally in regard to the CRPD. The Caribbean Development Bank, one of our powerful regional institutions and very important regional institutions, aims to support the attainment of the rights of persons with disabilities. And they thought that we didn't have enough information, so they wanted to use some countries as samples. So they tried to get both big countries and little countries, countries over this side of the region, countries over that side of the region. And so they wanted to find out what was happening in individual countries, so that then they could put together what was happening in the entire region. Because although we are close in how we think and our culture and stuff, we still have differences. And so those differences are likely to emerge when we are doing these studies. So they wanted us to identify country-specific challenges, and then we'd put those all together, and then we would identify Caribbean region-specific strategies. So 4 countries were identified: Grenada, Jamaica, St. Lucia, and Trinidad and Tobago. Remember I said big countries, little countries, countries over here, countries over there. And what we are going to share today is the results from the disability assessment in Jamaica. The assessment has been shared in the other countries already, so that has already been done. Next slide. So how did we do this? So we had 2 ways to do this. So nowadays, years ago, we used to underdo a lot of research where we had figures and numbers all the time. And we do those as well. But we have also found that in research, we also need to talk to people a lot more. When you do the figures and numbers, you kind of ask people very specific questions, and they say yes or no, and you collate all those numbers and you get percentages. But over time, we have found that that kind of research gives us one kind of information. But there's also another kind of information that's important, and we call that qualitative research. The ones with the numbers we call quantitative research. The ones where we talk more to people and people can just talk and express themselves, we call that a qualitative research. And so we did both. So first I'm going to talk to you about the qualitative research. So the first thing we did was that we looked at all the research that had been done in Jamaica already and in the Caribbean region. And we were, in Jamaica, we have done quite a bit of research already. Not enough, but quite a bit of research we had done already. So we looked at all of that work. Then we looked at all the treaties and the laws and the policies that the Jamaican government had so far put forward, and all the programs and the projects that they were doing. Then we had what we called elite interviews. Remember, I told you about the talking to people. So we spoke to people who were in charge of agencies all across the country. And we also spoke to them not only about how they felt about the questions that we had to ask them about disability, but we also spoke with them about how their organization functioned in terms of meeting the rights of persons with disabilities. And then we spoke with persons with disabilities or their caregivers. So we had focus groups, and we had very specific questions that we threw out, and then we listened to the answers, and then we put those answers together. So I'm going to report on all of those. In the quantitative, when we were doing the measurements now, we looked at how much money is spent in the government for persons with disabilities. So we looked at the budgets for the ministries and the departments, and so we looked at those budgets to see how much money was spent. Then we had a survey now of persons with disabilities. This is where we were doing the numbers now with persons with disabilities, where we asked specific questions, and we had interviewers go out and ask specific questions. And so we spoke with persons with disabilities in 2 different ways. One, to get the qualitative, the talking, where we allowed people to speak and just say what they had to say. And then we also had the bits where we asked questions that we could put in numbers. So in that one, the second one, we spoke to about close to 300 persons, and we spoke to persons all across Jamaica. Every single parish was represented. And we also spoke to persons providing services for children, for persons with disabilities. I work with children, I tend to say children first. All right, next slide. So first, let's look at what happens in the international treaties for how Jamaica performs. Next slide. So these are the main human rights treaties that most countries that are put out by the United Nations. So there's the International Convention on the Elimination of Racial Discrimination. There's a Convention on Civil and Political Rights. There's a Convention on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights. Convention on all forms of discrimination against women. The Convention on the Rights of the Child. The Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, and Convention on the Protection of the Rights of Migrant Workers and members of their families. And Jamaica has signed to all of these, signed and ratified to all the major human rights treaties across the world. Next slide. Now, that's the international things that we signed. And now let's look at what we have done within the country. So between 2015 and 2021, Jamaica the Parliament had looked at 157 different pieces of legislation. So that's what the Parliament is supposed to do. That's their main role. Their main role is to make laws that make life better for the people of Jamaica. So between 2015 and 2021, 157, but about a half of these were amendments. So sometimes when you make laws, things change, and you have to go back and you have to change the law to reflect, you know, the new knowledge that we have or the new situations in the country. So about half of them were amendments, and just under a half were new laws. So one of the new laws would have been the Disability Act, for example. That would have been a new law. We also looked at the policy, because apart from laws, we have policies. So we also looked at the policies, and there were 60 national policies across the country that had to be approved by the cabinet and go to the parliament and so. But within each ministry or department or agency, there are also policies that are just relevant to that ministry. But these were the ones that run across all the ministries. So what we did was we looked at the legislation and the policy, and we wanted to analyze how these were working for persons with disabilities. Now, you see that huge number. We couldn't analyze all of those, so we had to be selective about which policies and which laws we analyzed. So we selected any policy or legislation that was specific to persons with disabilities. So that would have been the Disabilities Act and the Special Education Policy. We also looked at all education legislation. That would be the Education Act and the Early Childhood Act and regulations. We looked at child protection and parenting support legislation. So we reviewed the Child Care and Protection Act, and we reviewed the National Parent Support Commission Act. We also reviewed employment legislation. That's the Employment Act and regulations. We reviewed legislation affecting access, such as the Building Act, and then we reviewed Jamaica's overarching plan, the Vision 2030, the National Development Plan for the country. Next slide. So this was how we reviewed them. These were the things we were looking for in every one of these laws and plans. First, we were looking at whether persons with disabilities were actually mentioned in these laws and plans. That's first. Next, we wanted the definition. We wanted to see whether disability was defined and whether it was measured, how it was measured, and what model of disability was being used. Next, we wanted to know whether there was data on persons with disabilities in those documents that were used to guide the actions. Minister spoke about the importance of having data to guide actions, right? Then we assess for diversity. So we wanted to know whether disability was just considered as one blanket category, or whether it included the type of disabilities, the onset of disability, and the severity of disability. We also wanted to check whether there was any intent in those laws and policies to be in line with the goals of the convention, the CRPD. So we wanted to know whether it included support, whether it included equity, and whether it included access for persons with disabilities. We wanted to know whether it was coherent, whether they were coherent with other relevant policies. And we wanted to know whether there was budgetary allocation for persons with disabilities included in those, because it's okay to have the laws and the policies. If you don't have the money that follows it, then nothing happens. It becomes a policy on paper and nowhere else. We wanted to find out whether persons with disabilities or their representatives had been included in the drafting of those policies and the legislation. We wanted to know whether there was intersectionality, which means whether it was recognized in those laws and policies that disability intersected with other constructs such as age and sex. And then finally, we wanted to know whether there was any process of monitoring and evaluating what was happening to persons with disabilities in relation to these laws and policies, and whether that review process included persons with disabilities. So you see, we had 10 things. Next slide. We looked at 7 laws and 8 national policies. And we had a key, we had a score. So if the things, those 10 things that I mentioned, if they weren't there, the score was 0. If they were there a little bit, the score was 1. If they were there in a fulsome way, the score was 2. So the maximum number you could get was 20. And I'm just going to summarize what we found with the laws and policies. The laws and policies that focused on persons with disability had the highest scores. So they were 16 out of 20 or 17 out of 20. They weren't perfect, but they were very close to perfect. We found that the laws and policies that were passed before the Disability Act had lower scores. So that has both a positive and a negative connotation now, right? So the positive bit of it is that it seems that when the Disability Act came into force, that subsequently persons were taking it into account. But it meant that we weren't taking it into account before that. The third thing that we found was that laws and policies that included persons with disabilities in the process had higher scores. So just as you say, nothing for you without you, right? So once you're included, then those laws and policies were better. But there were noticeable gaps. There was no good definition of disability throughout. There was limited data. For most of the laws and policies had limited data, but the data was more limited for persons with disabilities. There was limited resource allocation, so there wasn't a lot of financial information within those laws and policies, but it was still more limited for persons with disabilities. There was limited gender sensitivity, so there was no mention of the differences that existed between males and females, and how that was to be managed and how that was to be supported and resourced. There also was limited implementation, monitoring, and evaluation. So how those laws were to be brought in force, and the monitoring of them, and how they were evaluated, and especially including persons with disabilities in the process, was not being done very well. So some positives and some negatives out of that. The elite interviews and the institutional assessments, we did these together, but we separated how individuals felt, which was the elite interviews, versus how their institutions functioned, which is the institutional assessment. Next slide. We use what we call a convenience sample, which means we kind of selected the organizations that we thought would give us a good spread of organizations that work and provide service for persons with disabilities. And we tried to make in that spread that we had both genders, all ages, urban, rural, and all socioeconomic groups. So we spoke with persons in 14 different organizations. 6 were in government ministries, departments, and agencies. 4 were in non-governmental organizations. 2 were private sector. 1 was an academic institution, and 1 was an international development partner. So we tried to cover everyone. Next slide. And we asked questions in very specific areas. Here were the areas that we asked questions. We asked about a personal and an institutional understanding of key terms. So we asked whether people had a good definition of disability, whether they knew what inclusion meant, whether they knew about the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, and whether they were aware of the Sustainable Development Goals, and particularly those that have to do with persons with disability. The Sustainable Development Goals are a set of goals that have been agreed to internationally that is supposed to make life better for everybody across the world. Policies, we ask about the policies and their organizational practice. We ask whether there was inclusion in their organization, whether there was access, whether persons with disabilities were on their staff. We asked about their advocacy practices, whether they did any policy or advocacy work for persons with disabilities. We asked whether they had programs and service delivery that were inclusive. We asked whether there was participation of men and women with disabilities in their organizations, and whether that participation was proactive or whether it was reactive. We asked about whether they collected data on persons with disability and whether that disability was disaggregated by gender, age, or with the type of disability. We asked about resourcing for disability, whether their budget, within their budget, they considered a budget for persons with disabilities. And we asked how they coordinated with other institutions and agencies. So let's see what we found from those. So the first thing was that there was not a good understanding on the definition of disability. This is big, right? Because if you can't define something, you can't measure it and you can't take it into account. So there wasn't a good understanding on what defined disability. And persons really didn't either have a good understanding of the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, or indeed on the Sustainable Development Goals that were related to disability. There were no organizational policies on inclusion. Remember, note that I mentioned a whole range of different types of organizations. There was no organizational policy on inclusion. Persons said, oh, but we are an inclusive organization. I said, yes, that's great, but where is it written down? And it wasn't written down, but persons said that they were inclusive. But what persons also said was that they were kind of waiting on the Disability Act to come into force for them to change their organizational policies. Okay. Then persons with disabilities, we found, were not adequately represented in the workforce. And when they were, the jobs were typically in the clerical and administrative categories. They weren't at the higher levels, the professional and the more technical categories. We found that there was limited data collection. So persons would say to us, of course we have persons with disabilities in our organization. We would say, well, what proportion of persons with disabilities are in your organization? And they couldn't tell us the proportion. They couldn't tell us that proportion because nobody was actually measuring it. And they couldn't tell us whether by gender, whether it was male or female. They couldn't give us a good sense of that. And of course, when you collect the data, because there isn't a good definition of the disability, then we don't know how valid that data is. Because there are likely to be a larger proportion of persons with disability who may not have been included in that. There was limited budgetary allocation to facilitate services for persons with disabilities, and there was inadequate coordination of services. The organizations that were focused on persons with disabilities were those who primarily had appropriate programs and services. So the disability centered organizations were definitely doing their work in terms of meeting the needs of persons with disabilities. We then had focus groups where we talked to persons with disabilities and their caregivers. Next slide. We had 8 focus groups. We had 79 persons. We had 6 focus groups that were gender specific, so that meant we only had males in one group, and we only had males in the groups, and then we only had females in other groups. We had urban representation, we had rural representation, and we had persons with disabilities and their caregivers. Next slide. So this is what the focus group discussion said. First, in terms of family life, participants reported variability in inclusion in family activities and family support. So there were some persons who said they were fully included in everything, their family was very supportive of them, and there were other persons who felt excluded, that the family was not really involving them in all that was going on. In terms of community activities, persons felt similarly. There were some who felt that their community was doing well for them, and there were others that didn't think that their community was very supportive. In conducting their day-to-day activities, persons with disabilities said that they had limited access, and that limited access was from a range of things, from difficulty in walking on sidewalks, and we come to that, and difficulty with transportation, difficulty accessing buildings. So conducting day-to-day activities was made much more difficult for persons with disabilities. In terms of physical, mental, sexual and reproductive health, persons reported good physical health services. They felt that their treatment was adequate within the health sector. However, once they had seen the physicians and everything, and they were then given their prescriptions and referred to therapy, they couldn't afford much of what they needed because of the cost. So the cost for medication, further investigation, you know, the CT scans, the MRIs, those kinds of things, the therapeutic services was challenging. They felt that, persons felt that while that one part of the physical health service was good, mental health was a real problem, that they did not have much access to mental health services, and they also felt that they did not have much access to sexual and reproductive health. In fact, there are many examples of persons who felt that persons with disabilities should not be involved in anything having to do with sexual activity. And you know, there are lots and lots of comments about that. And even within the sectors, when they tried to inquire, that they were met with stigma and discrimination. They also reported that there wasn't good access to assistive aids that they needed to make their daily lives more comfortable. Next slide. In terms of education, most persons said that they had access to up to secondary level education. But there were many persons who wanted to go on to higher education, but the financial constraints precluded them. So they couldn't, they had the intent to go, they had the qualification to go, but they didn't have the funding to go. They also reported that there was not enough support for them transitioning from school to work. In terms of the labor force participation, they reported that there were more opportunities available for employment for persons with disabilities now than there were in the past. But there was still stigma and discrimination in employment. So persons reported, for example, when they went in for interviews, that they could see the expression on people's faces and they realized that they had a disability. And you know, there wasn't enough support for them. There was also limited access to business development services. For persons who wanted to start their own business, they didn't have any access to business development services. Next slide. In terms of housing, persons were very concerned about housing, and they reported the need for designated housing for persons with disabilities within housing schemes. Transportation was a big problem. Mobility and transportation were major concerns. And transportation was the route to many other activities. So if you didn't have good transportation, then you couldn't access the other services. Finally, social protection. Sorry, in transportation, persons with disabilities were asked to pay more for a journey, or they were not taken on the journey at all in some of the private services. In terms of social protection, there was limited social protection. The persons were happy for the tax exemption and the educational grants, but they felt that being on the PATH program required them to be in very dire circumstances. You could only get it if you were the poorest of the poor. And it was not recognized enough that persons with disabilities needed additional financing because of some of those costs, the investigation, the treatment, everything. Next slide. So now we come on to the survey when we asked questions and pooled those questions together. Next slide. So we spoke to almost 300 persons. 2/3, or 63% of the persons, were persons with disabilities, and the other 1/3 were their caregivers or their family members. And we got the names and the contact from organizations that were providing services for persons with disabilities. There were 57% were male and 43% were female. 2/3 of the sample were representing adults with disabilities, and 1/3 was representing children with disabilities. All parishes were represented. Of the adults, 68% of adults were single or were never married, and 50% of persons with disabilities had no children. Next slide. In terms of their diagnosis, the majority had been diagnosed by a health professional, 90%. And when we looked at the causes of disability, almost 60% of disability was present from birth and was congenital. About 1/5 happened because of an illness. Accidents and injuries accounted for 8%. Violence accounted for 3.5%. And then there were some other things. And, you know, there are some things that are in our culture, demonic causes and wrong medicine. Those are well within our culture, and persons still thought that these were the causes of disability. Next slide. So we looked at what types of disability persons had, and there's a different measure for adults as compared to children. In adults, there's a special group called the Washington Group, and they have put forward some questions that help us to identify the type of disability. And for the adults, the single commonest type of disability was one that affected mobility. So that was almost 1/3 of adults, and then following that was vision, and then communication, and then self-care. When we looked at disability among children, though, we had a completely different spread. So the most common disabilities among children were learning, behavior, and concentration, before mobility and speech and those other disabilities. So the disabilities, the profile for children was quite different. Next slide. 2/3 of persons with disabilities reported that their homes were in poor or very poor social status. Most, over 90%, lived in homes with modern toilet facilities, which means a flush toilet and running water. And that's just a little bit higher than the national average, but only 13%, just under 13% of homes had wheelchair access. Mobile telephones were in the homes of most persons with disabilities, 96%. Computers were in about below a half of homes, 42%. 80% of persons with disabilities reported having internet access at home. The national average is closer to 90%, and just under half reported using those services. 60% reported using the internet at some time, And most persons with disabilities who use the internet were using a smartphone. And when you look at the proportion with computers, then you can understand why more people are using a smartphone. The main reasons for not accessing the internet were not understanding computers, not being able to afford it, not having an interest in it, and having a disability that prevented persons perceived prevented them from having access. Next slide. In terms of mental health, 1 out of every 3 children and a half of the adult population reported that they had at least monthly mental health concerns, particularly anxiety, nervousness, and worry. I want you to think back to what I said, that persons with disabilities in the focus group reported that they did not have access to mental health services, and yet mental health concerns were a significant problem. In terms of assistive aids, they were used by 41% of the population, but some persons use multiple aids. The most frequently reported assistive aids were the mobility ones, the canes, the wheelchairs, and the kinds of supports. Visual aids were the next common, used by 12%. Of all the persons who were using assistive aids, 44.5%, or just less than a half, said that their aids were in poor condition. Although the technological aids were less common among persons with disabilities, those were almost always reported to be in good condition. Next slide. Almost 90% of persons with disabilities had attended school. Remember, we got that in the focus groups as well. Most persons felt that they had at least some access to education. The lowest attendance, however, was at preschool. Only 60% of children with disabilities were attending preschools. The national average for attendance at preschool is 95%. So that's a huge problem. The reasons for not attending school were the impairment or the health condition that persons had, transportation, lack of assistive devices, lack of support for personal care, because some persons will need more support for personal care, and where there was no support, they couldn't attend school. Denial of enrollment by administrators. I mean, parents of children are told all kinds of things about why their children are not to be in school. We don't look after those type of children here. No, so we don't want those children here. So they get told all kinds of things about their children, and they get denied enrollment. Inaccessible school buildings. Some of our school buildings are still not accessible. And the last thing was that there weren't any teachers who were able to provide the teaching and learning support for children with disabilities. Next slide. In terms of the labor force, 70% of the adults had said that they had worked for pay at some time. But when we asked how many people were working in the week prior to when we were talking with them, only 20% were in employment. So it seems that the employment is more intermittent. Those who were in employment typically earned less than the national minimum wage. So what we have here is not just unemployment, but we also have underemployment, where people are not being paid a fair wage. Next slide. We asked persons with disabilities whether they were aware of the laws and policies that had been designed to maintain their rights, and only 12% reported that they knew about the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. Only 12% knew that there were rights for persons with disabilities. Only 7% knew about the convention itself. Only 6% were aware that there was a national policy for persons with disabilities. 50% reported being members of organizations for persons with disabilities, but only 26% reported that they were active members, meaning that they were regular attenders and they were contributing. Next slide. So there was other information that we obtained. First, there is not good prevalence data on disability. Second, it was very difficult to access the information on how much the government is spending on disability. It was easy to access, like the Ministry of Labor and Social Security, the JCPD. Some things were easy to access, but among other ministries, it was difficult to actually find out how much money was being spent on services for persons with disabilities. There, we did a complete monitoring and evaluation system review, and this showed that there was inadequate monitoring and evaluation of what was happening. Next slide. So we made some very broad recommendations. We're going to cone down on these a little bit more in your working groups later on. So the first recommendation was that, you know, based on the limited knowledge of persons, both persons with disabilities and persons working in the organizations, that we really need a comprehensive public education program on the Disability Act and the additional laws and policies that support persons with disabilities. Second, there was need for a comprehensive evaluation of the legislative and policy framework and against the tenets of the Disability Act and the CRPD. So we really now need to go through our laws and policies and revise them relative to the CRPD, so that within every ministry, within every agency, that persons with disabilities are represented adequately. Strategic review of the JCPD. The JCPD is now the organization that is recognized as the advocacy organization. So the strategic review of the JCPD would include its advocacy role, its coordination role, and its collaboration role. So there are a lot of agencies and organizations working in the area of supporting persons with disabilities, but there isn't an entity that coordinates. This is now part of the role of the JCPD, and therefore the strengthening of that role will be important. Because persons with disabilities were very unaware of a lot of the services available to them, the development of an ICT hub for programs and services for persons with disabilities was recommended. A review of the social protection system. This is currently under review. A review of the social protection system for persons with disabilities was recommended because of the concerns that were raised about the PATH program and other supports. Next. So the development of a plan for a systems approach to address the barriers in the education and health sectors was important. We heard about the challenges with some health. We heard about the challenges with some education. All right, so we would have to now go in and identify the specific areas. A study to accurately determine the prevalence of disability, because we have not yet done that well enough. And a coordinated monitoring and evaluation system across ministries, departments, and agencies. Finally, everything that we have mentioned here will need to be financed. So there would need to be adequate financing of ministries, departments, and agencies to allow for the development of programs, the implementation of programs, and the continuation of those programs that are working well to ensure the rights of persons with disabilities are met and the objectives identified by this report are addressed. So I want to acknowledge the Caribbean Development Bank for their support for this study, all the participants that allowed this report to be comprehensive. I don't know how many of you in here might have participated in the focus groups or in the survey, but without your participation, we wouldn't have been able to get this information. And then the members of the Jamaica country team. I stand here representing a group of persons with specialists in different areas: gender, monitoring and evaluation, economics, all aspects. And so it was a team, a country team, that pulled all of this together. So thank you very much for listening, and I'm available for questions.
Excellent report. Give another round of applause. And it is, I could say without any doubt, that it is the first comprehensive study, because we have done so much work as her team together with the quantitative, the qualitative, the institutional assessment. There is a section for everything, Dr. Hendricks. So you have no issue. You, Minister, asked for evidence, and we have provided the evidence. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the time when you can pose your questions, you can make your comments, you can seek clarification. Just put up your hand when Ms. Cornwall, who we need to give her a round of applause too. She's a research assistant on the team and also helping us to coordinate all these workshops. So put up your hand, state your name. You can just have a comment, you can have a query. We want to hear from you. I don't know if anybody online has any questions. I assume that if there are questions online, somebody will indicate to us. No questions, no queries, no comments. Yes, we have a hand towards the back. Can we get some help with the mics, please? Well, I think it's for the persons online. They're trying to. Okay, but go ahead. Yes, in the interest of time.
Testing. Testing.
Yes, our.
So sorry, can you just repeat for the person?
Okay, again, my name is Errol Morgan from Cornwall Combined Disability Association and Kiwanis Action Club. I saw at the end of the presentation where it said that the JCPD, which is now the encompassing body to assist us with advocacy for our country, and I heard mention that we had one coordinator. She's doing a very good job, I must say, yes. But do you think that the one coordinator for 4 parishes is effective? Are you guys getting the proper data when it comes to really assisting persons in rural Jamaica, especially in Western Jamaica?
Dr. Hendricks, I think this one is for you.
Of course, we do not have enough human resources, and that is the reason the Disabilities Act made the JCPD a statutory body. So we have a new approved structure, which we will see at least one disability, what's the name again? Disability officer in every parish. So what you know as social worker, we will have one in every parish, and an additional support. We're seeking to get that individual having an additional support in office, because field work we know is critical. The JCPD, might I say, the new structure is 66, 72 overall in terms of between the JCPD and the Disabilities Rights Tribunal. So, but the JCPD itself will have 66 and will have or has branches and units, for example, that will look at compliance, access, and investigation. So we have a branch of persons who will do investigations, who will look at the compliance issues and the access issues, who will also take the reports on discrimination for investigation and then to channel them either to resolution or to the Disabilities Rights Tribunal. We have for the first time as well a fully equipped rehabilitation, social services, and transition branch that will not only have the 14 social workers or disability management officers, as they're called, but will also have vocational placement officers, career development officers, and we will have a coordinating program officer as well that will play that coordination role that was spoken about earlier. We also have a legal unit for the first time, so that when the matters of discrimination come, aside from the JCPD ensuring that it legally carries out its mandate, that legal unit will review those investigations to send them on to the tribunal as well. We have an ICT unit. We never had that before, so that will also help us to build out that ICT infrastructure and that unit, that hub, to provide guidance and support and information as to the possible technologies that can aid to make more independence for persons with disabilities, along with, of course, building out our ICT structure better to facilitate persons with disabilities in rural area being able to apply online wherever you are and upload your applications, whether for registration or for grants or complaining. You can upload those on that platform. We also have a policy unit that will be looking at the review of different policies and laws, as was mentioned earlier, so that there can be greater focus and what needs to happen for disability, you know, in terms of the policy aspect of the work happens right across ministries, agencies and departments, and within the JCPD as well. We also, I'm looking at, we will have our own accounting department and procurement, because before now, as a department, we depended on our parent ministry to take care of those matters for us, HR as well. So now the JCPD will manage those areas on its own. So it has built out considerably than what we currently have. Currently, I know we just have 3 social workers and 1 senior social worker. That is crazy. So having known that, the JCPD becoming now a statutory body will have greater manage its responsibilities better and be able to serve persons with disabilities in a better way. Trust I have answered.
Thank you so much, and happy to hear that you're going to provide more services to persons with disabilities. I think we have a second, and we'll entertain one more after that, and then we'll do the working group session. Yes, sir.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
My name is Anthony Bingham. I'm the president for the Hanover Disability Association, and I really endorse what my colleague has said in regards to one officer. It is very difficult for her to man 4 parishes, because in Hanover alone you have over 600 persons who suffer disability, and I know that maybe half of them is not registered with JCPD, and it's very difficult for her to find some of them based on the limited time she had. Anyway, my concern is that I'm glad the minister is here, because when you look at the congestion of Lucy, and there's no space for a person who is using the wheelchair, the visually impaired, amputated leg persons, you know, it is very difficult. And the vending took over the whole entire town. So I don't know what in the long term can be done, but we do need to have some sidewalk for the pedestrian, because they have to be bouncing and boring with vehicle traffic daily. So I'm glad the minister is here. So I don't know, under his portfolio or his recommendation, what can be done to assist some of these persons who suffer disability in the town or in the parish of Hanover.
Okay. Thank you for your intervention. Mr. Minister, do you want to say anything? Can come to.
You want to move the mic? All right. Firstly, let me thank you for the intervention. I think it's an important intervention. And it also resonates well when we just launched the accessibility checklist, which is supposed to be a complement, a guide to assist the planners and the developers in terms of instruction to ensure that we remove the barriers and that we put in place the designs that will accommodate and integrate effectively persons with disabilities. So going forward, the hope is that we have an amplified voice, and that in addition to that amplified voice, where I will speak to these issues in every way, on every platform, we are providing an instructive tool, a very simple tool, which we will ensure that the government and the private sector utilize. But listen, the reality is we have a far way to go. And there's a lot that has already been done that will either have to be dismantled and redone or adjusted. And it is a conversation that I think will require some more deliberation on the best way to approach treating with the issues that are already existing. For those things that are coming, we know that, listen, we're going to stand up and demand and compel that they be designed and built in this particular way. And I think that's been done now much more than it used to. But the question which you raised is, how do we treat with the issues that are existing? How do those adjustments and amendments be made? And what kind of investment are we going to put in? And I think that's a conversation we'll have to have. Perhaps we will need to do some kind of estimate that will give us an appreciation of the investment required to make the necessary infrastructural adjustments where needed, at least in those primary spaces like town centers, where persons with disabilities and just general public pedestrians need to have a free and safe and accessible space. All right? So the accessibility checklist first, and then we'll have the conversation with the across ministries to see how we can address some of the particular town centers. And I would hope that we also get the benefit of your recommendations and your concerns so that we can highlight those individual situations when we are championing the cause.
All right, another question here.
Okay, go ahead. Thank you so much, Minister.
Good morning. My name is Andrew East from Cornwall Combine. I heard Mrs. Hendricks mention about the ICT department or initiative that is in place, about to come in place. What's the timeline on that, and why haven't we had a proper registration drive due to the fact that all these this rebuilding and implementation is going on? Would have been an appropriate time, because all the prior registration and cards that has been put out for us to use have been null and void. Now we are waiting on a what do you call it? The disability. What do you call it again? No, not the act. After register, we get what is it?
The disability certificate?
Certificate, that's it. To be properly certified as a person with disability in Jamaica. How long? What is the timeline? Why haven't we had a drive to get that registration going already?
Okay, thank you so very much for that question. So the JCPD just got on board the developers to upgrade our system. You would have known that we had in 2013-14, through the World Bank and the IDB, a project to have our first electronic database. That we have outgrown, and so the current system that we are upgrading and developing, it will bring, as I indicated, greater access to you and assist us better to ensure that we have your information not only secure and safe, but we are able to carry through with our programs more effectively. So that project just started with UNICEF providing our funding. And so by the next financial year, it's an 18-month project, and it does include cleaning our current registry, because we do have a registry that is fully paper-based, although we have some of the information or the information online. And so we have to be cleaning and digitizing that process before we get to massive registration drives at this point. So we have over 50,000 records that we are currently through this project, as I said, cleaning, sanitizing, and digitizing before we get to where we can see the actual provision of the certificates and that more modern part of the process. So by the end of the 18 months, we started in what are we in? We started in November. They came on in November, and so the project should end 2025, 18 months. So we're looking to having done the first set of cleaning and digitizing to provide the first set of certificates in the new financial year, so that persons will begin to see that rolling out. So we have to get somewhere first, because we do too have people or names in our registry, persons who may have died and we don't know, persons who would have relocated. So many things have happened. So persons who do not have a disability for one reason or another, how they reached in the registry. So we have a lot of cleaning that we have to do. So you can appreciate that it will take some time to get to where you're getting, but within the new financial year, we are getting there. We should begin to roll out. Yes, that's what I'm not saying anything.
Backup question, follow-up question. Would it be helpful if us as an organization and different organizations collect the registration form in the meantime and register our members and submit it to you as a helpful guide towards that?
We will get there, because we have over the years, as you know, partnered with our different sector partners to assist us with registration. However, we do not want to begin to collect data on what we have. So we want to clean up house so we don't cross and cross-contaminate, if that's a good understanding of what I'm trying to say. Okay. So we will get to our sector partners to assist us as usual, but we want to clean up what we have in-house.
Okay, thanks, Dr. Hendricks. So we'll have one more question. We're going into the other section for long-term, short-term, and medium-term recommendations. So I know some persons have some comments, so maybe we can feature it in that segment, since that's what we'll be exploring anyways. So just for the question and answer section, one more, and then all the other comments can follow in the other section. Yeah? Okay.
Okay, good evening, everyone. My name is Andrew Lawrence. I have a nephew. He was recently diagnosed with ADHD, and it has been difficult for us to get a doctor to figure out what his issue is. And I saw on the display that you had some difficulty finding teachers and schools for those type of persons with disabilities. I'm wondering, how far away are you from helping or putting things in place for persons like those?
Prof?
Okay, so in terms of the diagnosis of ADHD, it's normally done by a pediatrician or a psychiatrist. So the point of contact in the public sector would normally be the public hospital, or in the private sector would normally be private pediatricians or psychiatrists. I'm just answering the section of the question about where to go. to get his proper diagnosis done. In terms of the second part of the question was about, oh, yeah, there have been, we continue to increase the number of pediatricians that we graduate from UWI every year, and there are now pediatricians in every single parish, which never used to be. So for the first time, there's still not enough, but that's what is limiting your ability to get your diagnosis in terms of the numbers. But at the Cornwall Regional Hospital, there would be pediatricians there who can guide you.
I know too that in the schools in particular, in the schools, the Ministry of Education has indicated that they are building out their teams of, assessment and support teams in the different regions. First of all, to also facilitate assessments and provide support in schools. And I know too that the MICO Teachers College would also be working to ensure that the special education teachers, that cadre of teachers are also being graduated and in the system. However, what we find is, I guess it is I don't know if it is a disability thing, but persons who work in special education sometimes migrate. They're part of those who tend to go to find greener pastures. So although the system might be pushing out more teachers, if someone decides to leave, then, there's nothing that can be done. However, I'm sure there's a commitment, and we will engage the Ministry of Education in regards to special education and to just maybe assess, the need so that we can ensure that the appropriate number of teachers are available ongoing. But teachers are scarce commodity. When I was growing up and a teacher, it was more than enough. But now, teachers are migrating. So we work with who we have right now and build out.
You have a question?
Final question before we go into the next segment.
You have one other question. Okay. All right. So I know that we have questions, but we wanted to close off the opening ceremony because what we just did was to close. Sorry. What we just had was the opening ceremony and the presentation of the report. And we are staying with us to continue the discussion. I don't know if the minister will stay with us, but I just wanted to indicate that we just had the opening ceremony. We had the presentation. We want to close off. Thank all our presenters. Give them a round of applause. We also thank Professor Maureen Sams-Vaughan for an excellent presentation. Lots to digest, I know, but it's very, very important that we take time with the report and we take out the strategic areas for intervention. So thank you very much. Minister, if you want to stay with us, you may stay. What we are going to do now, and those two persons who had their questions, I think there was a gentleman in the front and a lady at the back. When you are making your comments, if you can give suggestions for short-term, medium-term, and long-term. So we're going to start now. We would have moved you into working groups, but it's going to be a little challenging, so we'll just stay right here, and together you are going to talk to us now. So those persons who have indicated they have a comment or they have something they want to ask, when you are making your comment, please suggest to us what should be the immediate, Minister asked for urgent call for action. What are the immediate
I'm Dion Jennings, Chief Technical Director assigned to the Jamaica Council for Persons with Disabilities. When we protect, promote, and secure the rights and well-being of persons with disabilities, we move closer to realizing Jamaica's Vision 2030 goals, that of fostering inclusion, independence, access, and full participation of persons with disabilities in all spheres of national development. The Jamaica Council for Persons with Disabilities, under the Ministry of Labour and Social Security, is charged with the responsibility for implementing policies and programs for persons with disabilities. The JCPD, through the Ministry of Labour and Social Security, will continue to provide support to persons with disabilities to access assistive aids and adaptive devices to enable their independence in their everyday life.
What is a hearing aid?
A hearing aid is a small electronic device that someone who has a hearing loss uses.
Are there different types of hearing aids?
There are different types of hearing aids, and usually they are associated with the type of hearing loss that you have. The behind the ear can be used by anyone who has any levels of hearing loss, from a mild to a profound level. Then you have a receiver in the canal hearing aid, basically for persons with a mild to moderately severe hearing loss. They may have a bud, and if you have a greater loss, then a custom-made mold is attached to the RIC hearing aid, which is a receiver in the canal. Then you have an in-the-ear hearing aid, again, that is used by persons who have a mild to a profound hearing loss. Then you have in-the-canal hearing aid. That is used by persons, again, who have a mild to a moderately severe hearing level. The last hearing aid that we have is called the completely in the canal, and that is used for persons with a mild to moderately severe hearing loss.
Tips to care for hearing aids.
There are different types of hearing aid, and all of them are taken care of the same way, in the sense that they all use a battery, and you're not to use any liquid on the hearing aids. So there is a brush that normally comes with the product that you will clean off any wax or any moisture using a piece of tissue or a soft rag, and you take out the wax out of the openings of the hearing aid. So this is an in-the-ear hearing aid, and so this is taken care of by putting in the battery here, and then you remove it, leave the battery door open, put down in the case, and then if you have a behind-the-ear hearing aid, it's basically the same way. You have the battery door, and you remove the battery, you have the brush, you clean around the tips of the hearing aid, and you clean by the opening of the hearing aid, and you do not use any cleaning agent on the hearing aids. Also, at the tip of the hearing aid, you may have what is called a hair clear, and that is replaced whenever it is blocked with wax. So you put that on the tip of the hearing aid, and you insert it on the opening of the hearing aid so that it protects the hearing aid from excessive wax getting into the instrument itself. And then you remove this and you discard this as well. And that is basically all you have to do to take care of your hearing aids. Do not swallow the battery for the children. Do not leave it out for the animals to come and play with them. And you open the drawer, put it in its case, leave it open so that if there's any moisture in the hearing aid, it can evaporate. So parents, guard the hearing aid, protect them from any excessive moisture. So no cleaning of alcohol, no cleaning agent, no bleach or anything like that. Just when you remove it from your ears, like this, you take it out, you open the battery drawer, remove the battery, and you put it down in the case. And basically that's all you have to do to take care of the hearing aid that you have.
Where can I get information or help?
More information and help is available at the Jamaica Association for the Deaf, located 9 Morisco Road with entrance on Caledonia Lane in the Kingston 5 area.
What is a wheelchair?
A wheelchair is a chair with wheels used when walking is difficult or impossible due to illness, old age, or disability.
Are there different types of wheelchairs?
Yes, there are different types of wheelchair. Actually, you have 3 types: standing wheelchair, electrical wheelchair, and manual wheelchair.
Tips to care for wheelchairs.
Some tips for caring for the wheelchair are: 1. To remove all dust from the wheelchair frame by using a damp cloth. 2. Check the tires to ensure that they are still hard. Use a bicycle pump to add air if necessary. 3. Check the wheelchair frame for cracks and dents. If there are, be sure to repair.
Where can I get information or help?
You can get more information from Jamaica Council for Persons with Disabilities, 18 Ripon Road, Kingston 5.
What is a screen reader?
A screen reader is a piece of assistive technology that captures information from your screen and converts it to speech or as braille on a braille display.
Are there different types of screen readers?
So for the Windows-based computers, there are 3 types of screen readers that are used. There's the most famous one, JAWS, Job Access with Speech. There is NVDA, that means non-visual desktop access. And there is Narrator that is built into Windows. So for this demonstration, I'll be using JAWS. And if JAWS is already installed on your system, all you need to do is go to your desktop, press J for JAWS, and press Enter, and it will announce that it has been loaded. Right. So I'll be also using Microsoft Word to demonstrate how we type and how the screen reader works with us when we're typing. So I am now going to go ahead and type something, and you will hear the screen reader reading what I type, letter for letter.
I, space F, Y, space F, A, F, E, space I, S, space spelling error, A, F, I, O, N.
Right? And if I want to hear what I type, I use the arrow keys on the keyboard, and it will tell me what I type.
Hi, my name is Damien.
Hi, my name is Damien. And that was what I typed. So this is how the screen reader works along with Microsoft Word and any other program that we use on the computer. Also, for our mobile devices, yes, they too also have screen readers. So for the iOS, there's one called VoiceOver. And on the Android-based system, there is Google TalkBack, and Samsung also has their own screen reader that is called Voice Assistant. So for this demonstration, I'll be using Google TalkBack on a mobile phone. And how the screen reader works is if I put my finger anywhere on the screen and there's an icon there, then the screen reader will announce that icon. Let's try this.
Chrome. Double tap to activate. Double tap and hold to long press. Actions available. You swipe up then right to view.
Okay, so the icon that I touched was Chrome. And after it mentioned that I touched Chrome, it gave me some actions that I could carry out. So if I double tap, it would have opened Chrome. And it also gave me some other actions that I could carry out if I wanted to.
Where can screen readers be accessed?
Well, for the computer, you can purchase JAWS. It's quite expensive. It's about $1,200 US for the package. You can purchase it from Freedom Scientific. Also, for the mobile devices, once you purchase the device, the screen reader comes built into the device. So all you have to do is go into the accessibility setting and turn it on.
What is a white cane?
A white cane is a device that is used by both blind and visually impaired persons to navigate their way in any open space. How the white cane works is that you extend the hand with the cane out in front of you, and while walking, it will pick up surfaces and obstacles that may be in the way.
Where can white canes be accessed?
If you're blind, you can purchase a white cane at the Jamaica Society for the Blind for $3,000.
What is a prosthesis?
A prosthesis is a device used to replace a lost limb.
Are there different types of prosthesis?
Some of the different types of prosthesis would be upper limb, below knee, and above knee. This is an example of an above knee prosthesis. The components here, socket, a liner that goes in here, which is this part, a flexible knee, stainless steel titanium pylon, a foot shell, carbon fiber blade. Those are the components for a prosthesis, above knee. Yes? I'm going to show you what below knee prosthesis is. Here we are. Again, this is your liner, which fits onto your stump. This is the below knee. Fits onto the stump, fits into the socket, which is this. Pylon, carbon fiber shell.
Tips to care for your prosthesis.
Normal cleaning tips to take care of the prosthesis would be cleaning it with a non-abrasive cleaner, such as a hand soap. And that's basically what it is. Normal adjustments and things like that will be done by our prosthetic technician at the clinic. The other part of it is easy. It's a snap in, snap out, and he's going to show you how he takes it off. So go ahead, take it off. Comes off. This is your leg. Puts it back on. Locks into place. It's good to go.
Where can I get more information or help?
More information can be had at the Surgery Prosthetic Clinic at the Sir John Golding Rehab Center, Mona, Kingston.
A production of the Jamaica Council for Persons with Disabilities, a department of the Ministry of Labor and Social Security. The Disability Conversation.
What is a disability? A person with a disability is anyone who has a permanent physical, mental, intellectual, or sensory impairment that makes it difficult for them to fully and equally take part in society.
We at the Jamaica Council for Persons with Disabilities are working tirelessly to promote the rights and welfare of individuals with disabilities. Together with our partners, we strive to create an environment where inclusivity is celebrated.
What does access really mean? Like, how that work? Accessibility speaks to the design and provision of products, services, environments, and information that can easily be accessed, understood, and used by individuals, including those with disabilities or limitations.
We stand here united in our commitment to ensuring that no one is left behind. Disabilities awareness and accessibility in Jamaica are all our business and priority. It is time to break down barriers and to build a more inclusive society for all.
It ensures that everyone, regardless of their ability or disability, can participate and engage in various activities and interact with their surroundings without barriers or discrimination.
My son has a hearing impairment, and I have first-hand experience of the transformative power of support. The rehabilitative support and inclusion of persons with disabilities have empowered my son to pursue his dreams, overcome challenges, and contribute positively to society. JCPD is committed to unlocking the potential of every person with a disability.
Social media has the power to connect, educate, and inspire. So let's use our platforms to raise awareness, challenge stereotypes, and advocate for inclusive policies.
Accessibility and inclusivity are not just buzzwords. They are fundamental rights for all of us. It is our duty as a nation to ensure that persons with disabilities have equal access to education, employment, healthcare, and public services. Let us remember that the true measure of a society's progress is how it treats its most vulnerable members. And so I call upon all Jamaicans to join us in this noble cause. Together, we can build a nation where disabilities are not barriers, but opportunities for growth and empowerment.
For more information on how you can support JCPD and make a difference, visit our website at www.jcpd.gov.jm or connect with us on Instagram and Facebook at JCPDJA.
We are here celebrating our 50th anniversary. Let us put our hands together for the council.
Let us celebrate this remarkable milestone and recommit ourselves to the important work that lies ahead. Together, united and aligned in our vision for Jamaica,
let us not lose sight of the fact that the work to normalize the concept of inclusivity and putting an end to discrimination is far from complete.
We are committed as ministers to being bullish in continuing our collective efforts to work together as a team to remove these physical barriers that hinder the full participation and inclusivity of persons with disabilities. According to the recent data, more than 80% of the public spaces in our country, Jamaica, are still not fully accessible to our people, to our persons with disabilities.
There is no turning back. Ladies and gentlemen, let us rise and salute the Jamaica Council for Persons with Disabilities. 50 years growing stronger.
Learn some facts under the Act. It is important to know who and what is protected under the Disabilities Act. Here are some simple facts under the Act.
Tell me something. You hear about the Disabilities Act that will be enacted?
Yes, man. We know about it. February 14, 2022.
Oh. So what is it? What is the Disabilities Act?
The Disabilities Act protects persons with disabilities who have a permanent impairment like blindness, physical and intellectual disabilities, and so on.
So the Disabilities Act protects all persons with disabilities, including who are deaf?
Of course. The Disabilities Act is a law that protects every single person with a disability from discrimination.
Everybody?
Yeah, everybody.
Oh, I get it.
So much more facts are in the Act. Let's do our part and learn the facts under the Disabilities Act. A message from the Jamaica Council for Persons with Disabilities.
We are here celebrating our 50th anniversary. Let us put our hands together for the council.
celebrate this remarkable milestone and recommit ourselves to the important work that lies ahead. Together, united and aligned in our vision for Jamaica.
Let us not lose sight of the fact that the work to normalize the concept of inclusivity and putting an end to discrimination is far from complete.
We are committed as ministers to being bullish in continuing our collective efforts to work together as a team to remove these physical barriers that hinder the full participation and inclusivity of persons with disabilities. According to the recent data, more than 80% of the public spaces in our country, Jamaica, are still not fully accessible to our people, to our persons with disabilities.
There is no turning back. Ladies and gentlemen, let us rise and salute the Jamaica Council for Persons with Disabilities. 50 years growing stronger.
Learn some facts under the Act. It is important to know who and what is protected under the Disabilities Act. Here are some simple facts under the Act.
Tell me something. You hear about the Disabilities Act that will be enacted?
Yes, man, we know about it. February 14, 2022.
Oh. So what is it? What is the Disabilities Act?
The Disabilities Act protects persons with disabilities who have a permanent impairment like blindness, physical and intellectual disabilities, and so on.
So the Disabilities Act protects all persons with disabilities, including who are deaf?
Of course. The Disabilities Act is a law that protects every single person with a disability from discrimination.
Everybody?
Yeah, everybody.
Oh, I get it.
So much more facts are in the Act. Let's do our part and learn the facts under the Disabilities Act. A message from the Jamaica Council for Persons with Disabilities. Where do we want to go? A Jamaica that's inclusive and accessible. Learn some facts under the Disabilities Act.
Andrew, do you know that the Disabilities Act will be in effect February 14, 2022?
Yes, greatly. The Act will come into effect to protect the rights of persons with disabilities.
And do you know that if our rights are barred because of our disabilities, that is discrimination?
Yes, greatly. Reasonable arrangements are necessary for persons with disabilities.
Reasonable arrangements?
Yes. For example, sign language interpreters, special assistive aids and devices, right, and appropriate text technologies.
Andrew, I am happy that this Act will be in effect.
I am happy to, greatly.
So much more facts are in the Act. Let's do our part and learn the facts under the Disabilities Act. A message from the Jamaica Council for Persons with Disabilities. Check this. The Disabilities Act establishes the JCPD to promote and protect the rights of persons with disabilities and a whole heap of other things. A fact under the Disabilities Act.
Mrs. Hendricks, I'm glad to see you. Now that the Act is in effect, what happened to the JCPD?
Yeah, what happened to the JCPD now?
Well, as of February 14, 2022, the Act establishes the Jamaica Council for Persons with Disabilities as a body corporate.
So what that mean?
So this new JCPD will be like an individual. So the body corporate will be an entity that will have a life of its own. It can sue and it can be sued. It will have a seal in its own name, and people will be able to come to the JCPD to make complaints about discrimination. that is persons with disabilities, of course. So this new entity will be managed by a board of management who will report to the minister. It will have so much more responsibilities than the current JCPD.
Sounds good to me.
Yes, greatly. It's really good. Persons with disabilities looking forward to the act becoming effective February 14, 2022.
I like what I hear.
So much more facts are in the Act. Let's do our part and learn the facts under the Disabilities Act. A message from the Jamaica Council for Persons with Disabilities. The disability conversation.
What is a disability? A person with a disability is anyone who has a permanent physical, mental, intellectual, or sensory impairment that makes it difficult for them to fully and equally take part in society.
We at the Jamaica Council for Persons with Disabilities are working tirelessly to promote the rights and welfare of individuals with disabilities. Together with our partners, we strive to create an environment where inclusivity is celebrated.
What does access really mean? Like, how that work? Accessibility speaks to the design and provision of products, services, environments, and information that can easily be accessed, understood, and used by individuals, including those with disabilities or limitations.
We stand here united in our commitment to ensuring that no one is left behind. Disabilities awareness and accessibility in Jamaica are all our business and priority. It is time to break down barriers and to build a more inclusive society for all.
It ensures that everyone, regardless of their ability or disability, can participate and engage in various activities and interact with their surroundings without barriers or discrimination.
My son has a hearing impairment, and I have first-hand experience of the transformative power of support. The rehabilitative support and inclusion of persons with disabilities have empowered my son to pursue his dreams, overcome challenges, and contribute positively to society. JCPD is committed to unlocking the potential of every person with a disability.
Social media has the power to connect, educate, and inspire. So let's use our platforms to raise awareness, challenge stereotypes, and advocate for inclusive policies.
Accessibility and inclusivity are not just buzzwords. They are fundamental rights for all of us. It is our duty as a nation to ensure that persons with disabilities have equal access to education, employment, healthcare, and public services. Let us remember that the true measure of a society's progress is how it treats its most vulnerable members. And so, I call upon all Jamaicans to join us in this noble cause. Together, we can build a nation where disabilities are not barriers, but opportunities for growth and empowerment.
For more information on how you can support JCPD and make a difference, visit our website at www.jcpd.gov.jm or connect with us on Instagram and Facebook at JCPDJA.